It is time for Strange New Worlds episode 3, everybody. And I'm happy to say that this one was one of those episodes that sort of blends a little bit of past shows with current show and takes some of the stuff that we've seen from different timelines and different versions of Star Trek and kind of blends it all together into something that's very unique for what they're building with Strange New Worlds. Um, I personally am not a huge fan of the time travel stuff because I think they rely on it way too much for Star Trek. But this episode did it in an interesting way. I think it was just a fun kind of standalone episode, and I think that's what Strange New Worlds is becoming known for, is being very much like the original series in the sense that it's more about the individual episodes than it is about, say, a narrative arc, even though there is an overarching narrative arc between, having like small story arcs within the overall series. This was definitely a standalone episode, which was character development for Noonien-Singh's character, for her job as security officer and her relationships and the complicated relationship she has with the past and her ancestor Khan. I don't want to say anything else beyond that because of spoiler territory, because everything from this point forward is spoiler full. So if you need spoiler free, I'm not the person to give that to you. That being said, if you have watched the episode, get ready because we're going to talk all the things. But if you need time to go back and watch it first, this is your chance to do so. Countdown to the spoiler territory in 5, 4, 3, 2, roll it. So we start this episode off with Noonien Singh. She's wandering the halls and after a sparring lesson with the doc, and she's obviously got some angst going on, and a bunch of stuff related to what has been going on, and she has a troubled history because of her family name, because of that generational tie that kind of roots her in the history of what her ancestor did. And so she's always struggling with who she is because of the name, because of that infamy. And we've seen it throughout the 2 seasons so far, and she's still struggling with it. And she's wandering through the halls, and this person just appears out of nowhere with a gunshot wound in his chest, and he's got this device, and he's like, "You have to save them," blah blah blah. And he gives her this device, and then next thing you know, she's wandering onto the bridge, thinking that she's still on her Enterprise, but it turns out she's no longer on her Enterprise. She's on another Enterprise in a different timeline where James T. Kirk is the captain of the Enterprise. And here we see the same actor who's playing, I believe it's the same actor, yeah, who's playing Samuel Kirk, who is James Kirk's brother. And Samuel Kirk is actually stationed on her version of the Enterprise. So when she stumbles into the bridge, there's this confusion washing over her of like, what is going on here? This is not my Enterprise. Oh no, I've stumbled into some sort of time travel, dimension travel thing. And very quickly, she figures it out. But as she goes and talks to him in private and they're arguing about things together, he goes to grab the device out of her hand, pushes the button in. Now suddenly they're both on Earth. And it's the Earth of his timeline. Only it's the past. So now they're even further distorted in where they are in the timelines and everything else. And so this is an episode about sort of giving James T. Kirk more of a background and also giving her a chance to have a moment where she gets to have a real relationship with a person who doesn't judge her based on her name because he doesn't know who she is because he hasn't lived through everything that Khan did, because it's a younger version of James T. Kirk. So I loved the character development we got to see for her character in this episode because it was all about her dealing with this crisis and showing that she's a very capable Starfleet officer, but also the relationship that happens between those two individuals as they deal with this crisis together, and her finally, for the first time ever, like fully connecting with someone who has no clue about her past history and purely judging her on her actions in the present. And of course, they share a romantic moment, a kiss and everything else. Not everything else, I shouldn't say that. That's misleading. They share a kiss. There is a romantic moment, but nothing beyond that. Um, and I wonder how this is going to impact her character moving forward Because when she comes back to the Enterprise at the end of all this, which of course you know she does because this is Star Trek and the good guys always win. They deal with the anomaly, um, and she gets back on the ship and calls James T. Kirk in her timeline, and uses the ruse of, well, your brother Sam, I need to know this, that, or the other about his file. And he's like, oh man, what has Sam done this time? But really, she just wants to feel that human connection again because she's lacking that in her personal timeline because of her name. Um, Also very interesting during this episode was, the Romulan threat. And in this version of events, in James T. Kirk's timeline in this episode, the Romulans are still a major threat, and the person who is set on disrupting the timeline is a Romulan who has been disguised like a human, and they're basically trying to um, get into this facility where they're doing genetic modifications. And within this facility where they are doing the genetic modifications, we find a young child locked in a room being experimented on, and it says Khan on the door, and there's like paintings, crayon paintings and stuff all over the walls. And so, she's having a moment of crisis being back here with Khan because she knows what Khan does. And it's kind of like I'm going to use a very, hopefully, no one finds this offensive, and hopefully, people can understand the impact of what I'm trying to talk here because it's context. There's a reason why every time we start to talk about time travel, everyone always wants to say something like, oh, I'd go back and I would take out Hitler. In theory, sounds like a great thing to do. In practice, however, we don't know how many of the things that we have today, whether it's history, social aspects, women's rights, you know, people being able to vote regardless of their skin color, segregation, all of these things. We don't know how many of those things would never have come to pass had, you know, that not happened. Like, right, had Nazi Germany not happened. So the idea that we could just go back and magically erase everything that the Nazis did and that's somehow going to make the present world a better place, we can't know that. We can't know that because there are so many things that could happen. We don't know how much, because it was a horrific thing. Like those actions taken by that individual, Hitler and the Nazi Party, those actions have absolutely influenced the modern world we live in, you know, laws and rules and regulations and politics and racism and all these other things. So the idea that she's facing at this moment when she sees this child is it's just an innocent child right now. That individual is just a child. What they Commercial time, everyone. Huge shout out to the Guild Champions, who are our highest tiered membership here on YouTube. We've got Bubbleonia, Ancient Entity, Craziest Relative, Remy D. Thanks so much for your support here on the channel. And of course, to all of our members who help keep me full time here on YouTube. Thanks so much for your support, for being here, for checking in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, super chat any live streams or premieres you see, super thanks any video uploads you see. Don't forget YouTube Shorts in that category as well. And hopefully, we'll see you in the next live stream. Don't forget the Discord. Links are down below. Let's get back to the video. What they grow up to be is horrific, but those things are necessary to build the timeline where we have the utopia that the growing utopia, the experimental utopia that Starfleet and the Federation have. Obviously, as we talked about in the previous episode, they're still dealing with civil rights issues and racism and other things, but the utopia is working, even though it has its flaws. So they kind of need Khan and they need his atrocities to get to the point where the Federation is in her timeline. So it's a very tricky thing to deal with. But, things happen during that timeline shift. The James T. Kirk from that timeline dies, and she eventually ends up saving the day and making sure that Khan doesn't get released or killed or anything else, and has a brief moment with her ancestor before she's transported back to her timeline. And then, as she's in her quarters at the end of this, we get an agent of the temporal division, which hasn't actually been created yet, and they take the device and tell her thank you for fixing the timeline, and they're off. So, I mean, standalone episode, but character development for Noonien-Singh's character, which I think is very important, giving her a human side. When she calls Kirk at the end of this episode, James T. Kirk, she's in tears after the call because she actually felt a human connection with his alternate dimension counterpart, and now she's feeling alone again. So I don't know where this is going to go from here, but I think it's a very interesting little side arc for her character. Can't wait to see how it's going to play into the overall themes and ideas that they have for season two. But another great episode. I am fully engaged and fully enjoying Strange New World season two. Love to hear your thoughts. Drop them down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon, and I'll see everybody in the next episode. Until then, stay safe. See you guys.